Good evening and welcome to the John Paul II New Evangelization Award Gala in Washington, D.C. My name is Father Charles Trujols and I am the director of the Catholic Information Center. I am very happy to be with all of you tuning from across the country and around the world. I think I can safely say that 2020 has not been a good year in worldly terms. From the global pandemic to the civil unrest in our country, everyone has suffered a great deal. But I am hopeful for the future of our country and of the CIC. From the outbreak of the pandemic until the present, the CIC was there, in your homes, through our live-streamed Mass. When churches were closed, we offered virtual adoration and recitation of the Rosary. For the first time in CIC history, we had to board up our windows and remove the Blessed Sacrament from our tabernacle for fear of desecration during the time of social unrest. Even then, we continued to broadcast my private Mass. It was not easy. I had to cross the police perimeter and come in through the back door, like a thief. Why was I doing that? Because I firmly believe that the special grace of the Mass pours out beyond the physical location of the CIC to heal Washington, D.C. and our nation. The CIC has been in the heart of Washington, D.C. for a long time, and we are here to stay. It is our mission to provide spiritual nourishment to our leaders and to professionals from all walks of life. We have been able to offer public masses since mid-June, and the chapel here has not been empty. And confessions are picking up. All this is a great source of joy for me. Under normal circumstances, we would all be together this evening having dinner at the Mayflower Hotel in D.C., enjoying some good wine. This got me to think about the image of the gospel of the new wineskins. Jesus says, "No one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the skins are ruined. Rather, the wine is poured into fresh wineskins." We have all been stretched and challenged this year. It was a year for a lot of firsts at the CIC. First live-streamed Mass, first Zoom lecture, and now first virtual gala. We cannot pour the new wine of Jesus' teachings and grace into old wineskins. The current pandemic conditions called for a new wineskin version of the CIC. We adapted our program offerings in various ways to continue to serve you. We are answering St. John Paul II's call for a new evangelization that is creative and responsive to circumstances. And speaking of wine, if you would like to enjoy the Spanish wine tasting we have planned for our 5,000 donor sponsors an app, hurry up. You can still upgrade your sponsorship during the gala. See the link below. The CIC's mission would not be possible without a great team. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to the board of directors, the dedicated staff, and the volunteers whose professionalism and commitment have been unwavering during these past 8 months. And thanks to all of you for being here tonight. If you would like to contribute to our work of providing the sacraments and spiritual resources without interruption, come what may, I encourage you to click the link below and donate as you are able. I want to especially acknowledge the new evangelization sponsors, Leonard and Sally Leo, Tom and Lisa Janucci, the law firm of Kirkland and Ellis, the Knights of Columbus. We may at times feel a little hopeless, especially during the uncertain circumstances we are in. I ask the following commitment of you. The next time you come to Washington, D.C., please stop by the CIC's chapel, a Catholic landmark, and pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament and our Father, a Hail Mary, a Glory be for our country. I wished every Catholic who comes to our nation's capital did that. God has promised us that His word is living and effective, and your prayers will bear great fruit. Now I would like to turn it over to board member Alex Clement for some brief remarks. Alex joined the board last year, and she has been a fantastic addition to the CIC team. She's a graduate from the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service and Harvard Business School. She worked for many years in business consulting. Alex and her husband Paul are the parents of 3 wonderful sons. But before I do, here's a brief video detailing a little more about how the CIC has responded to all the challenges from this past year.
As the pandemic swept across the world and our society ground to a halt, stay-at-home ordinances were issued around the country, all with a common refrain: essential personnel only. City centers around the country emptied, Washington, D.C. among them. Except, of course, for a few critical buildings that remained abuzz with those individuals charged with guiding our nation through this moment. There would be no working from home, no Zoom meetings. Too much was at stake. And a crisis is no time to forget your faith. Spiritual support for those most essential of personnel in the heart of our nation's capital was needed now more than ever before. Public masses were canceled, but prayer is unceasing, and the Mass must go on. While our doors were forced shut, the CIC was among the first to crack open a virtual window to prayer and sacramental life with a sustained online presence. Recitation of the Rosary, adoration, celebration of the Mass, streaming live every day. And even during those tense days and nights when riots were occurring mere steps from our front door, behind our boarded windows, there was recitation of the Rosary, adoration, and celebration of the Mass, streaming live every day. Day after day, week after week, you've welcomed us into your homes and joined your prayers with ours as we pray for our capital, our country, and those essential personnel working tirelessly to guide us through this crisis. And it didn't stop there. The CIC continued and continues to deliver engaging intellectual and spiritual programming into your homes on issues at the intersection of religion and civic life, bringing the truths of our Catholic faith to bear on the halls of power in Washington and providing a window into Catholic Washington for all those watching from around the country. While our mission is local, our impact is national, now more than ever. Essential, personal, CIC.
Good evening. My name is Alexandra Clement, and I am honored to be a member of the Board of Directors for the CIC. I've been asked to talk to you tonight about CIC by the numbers, probably since I'm a numbers person myself and have been known to ask about cash flow numbers at our board meetings. But don't worry, I won't be talking about cash flow tonight. What I would like to share with you are 3 numbers which I believe capture the core of the CIC mission. First, 123,117. That is the number of hours people spent engaging in CIC's intellectual and spiritual content over the last year, both in person and online. Many of those hours were spent physically in the CIC on K Street, attending Mass, going to confession, receiving spiritual direction, or participating in one of the dozens of programs, large and small, hosted by the CIC throughout the year. But during this pandemic, the CIC has gone virtual. As soon as DC went into lockdown in March, Father Charles quickly pivoted to providing daily Mass online. What struck me personally was how much joy and hope he exuded to all those attending Holy Mass with him virtually. From Father Charles' daily celebration of the Holy Mass and recitation of the Rosary to pertinent online discussions on issues critical to a deeper understanding and application of our faith, you have spent tens of thousands of hours welcoming CIC onto your screens and into your homes. Here's the second number, 529. This is the distance in yards between the CIC Tabernacle and the White House. While CIC's online presence has allowed us to reach Catholics in every state and in over 40 countries, the CIC remains rooted in Washington. The importance of having the closest tabernacle to the White House cannot be overstated. After all, there's nothing more important to us Catholics than the celebration of the Holy Mass and the graces that flow from it. And just as the Mass is the center of Catholic life, the White House is at the center of our nation's capital. The CIC's physical location reinforces its centrality in serving the spiritual needs of the faithful who live and work here. Which brings me to my final number, 45. Most of those taking advantage of all the CIC offers here in DC are under the age of 45. Daily Mass, confessions, and our other programming are filled with energetic young professionals who are passionate about their faith and living it out in their jobs, communities, and families. These young professionals are the future leaders of our church and our country, and they call CIC home. So what do all these numbers add up to? Well, technically, 123,691. But in all seriousness, these numbers add up to a big and growing impact. Thank God. And while our mission is local, the impact of the CIC is national, now more than ever, serving no longer just Catholics in our nation's capital, but also around the country and our world. It brings to mind the parable of the mustard seed, which indeed is smaller than all the seeds, but when it is grown, it is greater than the herbs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in its branches. With your support, the CIC will continue to grow its branches to provide a home for a larger flock of birds every day. Thank you for your continuing support of the CIC, and congratulations, Arthur.
Hello from Rome. I hope you all are enjoying the Catholic Information Center's first virtual gala. My name is Father Thomas Joseph, and I run the Thomistic Institute here in Rome at the Angelicum. And I spent many years in Washington, D.C., and I know the work of the CIC well. They do a tremendous service, providing a place of prayer and sacraments on K Street, and evangelization in the heart of Washington, and instruction in the Catholic faith. Thank you to all of you who support their mission, and congratulations to this year's John Paul II New Evangelization Award winner, Dr. Arthur Brooks. As a musical treat for you, the Hillbilly Thomists, along with special guest Professor Robbie George, would like to share with you now this new song from our forthcoming album. It should be available soon, we hope by maybe mid-December, depending on production dates, and you will be able to buy it eventually in person at the CIC or online. God bless you all, and please enjoy your evening.
Well, I'm short, my Lord, short in all kinds of ways. Well, I'm short, my Lord, short on stature, short on faith. Well, I hear you make the difference up, you can make it up all the way. Oh, they say I'm on the tail. a tree down on Main Street where I can get a pretty good view. There's a tree down on Main where I can get a pretty good view. See what the talk is all about. Who are you? Yeah, I heard you call my name like I never heard before. Well, I heard you call my name like I never heard before. So coming down quickly, wanna hear your voice some more. The walk around this town came down so long ago. Well, the walk around this town came down so long ago. It's just one more walk around my heart. It's time for it to go. Well, I'm sure my Lord, sure in all kinds of ways. Well, I'm sure my Lord, sure on statue, sure on face. Yeah, I hear you make the difference up. You can make it up all the way.
What a great performance by the Hillbilly Thomists and Robbie George. You can be sure that the CAC will have their new album on our shelves when it is released. And now, we turn our attention to the awardee of our 2020 John Paul II New Evangelization Award, Dr. Arthur Brooks. Arthur is undoubtedly one of the leading and most effective voices in public policy and academia today. Through his writings, leadership, and public engagement, Arthur's remarkable career spans a wide breadth of issues and ideas, emphasizing the human dimension of public policy, poverty, and economics. And he does all this through a lens of attractive and engaging Christian anthropology that would be instantly recognizable by St. John Paul II. Arthur is professor of the practice of public leadership at the Harvard Kennedy School and Arthur C. Patterson Faculty Fellow at the Harvard Business School. Before joining the Harvard faculty in July of 2019, he served for 10 years as president of the American Enterprise Institute, a public policy think tank here in Washington, D.C. Not bad for a former professional French horn player. Throughout his career, Arthur has advocated uncompromisingly for the need to give all human beings the dignity they deserve, loving one another as God loves us. Catholic leaders like Arthur help set the standard to which all Catholic professionals should aspire. On top of that, he was lucky enough to marry a girl from Barcelona, Spain. That had a lot of weight in our decision. And it also didn't hurt that he dedicated his most recent best-selling book, Love Your Enemies, to my predecessor, Father Arnie Panola. The CIC is proud to honor him with our 2020 John Paul II New Evangelization Award. But before I turn it over to Arthur, I have two surprises to share. The first is for all of you watching. We wanted to make this virtual evening as engaging and memorable for you as possible. So instead of a standard acceptance speech, what you are about to see are 3 short lessons directly from Arthur to you, as if he's your personal professor right there in your living room with you. It's your very own CIC masterclass. And our second surprise is for Arthur. While we can't be together in person, a few special guests from around the country have sent in messages of congratulations and support for Arthur on being the recipient of the 2020 John Paul II New Evangelization Award, which we will see in between Arthur's lessons. I'm sure you will recognize a few of them. Without further ado, sit back and enjoy your CIC Masterclass with Professor Arthur Brooks.
Thank you, Father Charles. Thank you to the staff and the board of the Catholic Information Center, and thank you to all of you who generously support the CIC with your contributions and with your prayers. I'm so honored to be the awardee this year. The CIC, for me, like for so many of you, has played an integral part in my life. Many of you who are watching this are friends of mine, and you know that Father Charles has been a family friend of mine for many years. He's a member really of the Spanish Mafia in Washington, D.C., of which my wife is also a charter member. But beyond that, what a great advisor he's been to me and to so many others. And his predecessor, Father Arnie Panola, was my mentor, a friend, and my spiritual director for 9 years before his death in 2017. I'm convinced that he's looking down on us from heaven right now. He earned heaven for so many reasons. He was in my view, I'm pretty sure he's a saint, in no small part because he endured listening to my confessions every month for 9 years. I think of Father Arnie every day. I know many of you do as well. He continues to bless us all. New evangelization is what we need in this world today. What an opportunity it is to talk about this subject where there are so many problems. And to do this, I thought about it for a little while and I thought, well, I could make this a complicated topic. How do you go out into the world and make effective messages? But it's not a complicated topic because there's really only one important thing to remember. And that's what I want to talk about today in 3 parts, is the most important thing in being a proper Catholic evangelist. And that's the idea that comes not from any newfangled Madison Avenue marketing guru, not from any social scientist like me, but from St. Paul. 1 Corinthians 13:13. And now these 3 remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Love is our apostolate. Remembering that, we win. Remembering that, we will be successful. How do we do that? Well, that's my subject tonight. Specifically, I'm going to talk about how St. Paul was right. Now, you don't need me to convince you that St. Paul was right, of course, but for my own satisfaction as a social scientist, there's nothing that shows me the fundamental rightness of my Catholic faith more than seeing that everything that we've discovered over the past decades was known full well 2,000 years ago. And then after I show you that evidence, I want to take you to the 2 groups that I believe need this apostolate the most the two core constituencies of the Catholic Information Center: young people in Washington, D.C. and around the United States and around the world, and people who exist in the political sphere and who are subject to and victims of the lack of love that we actually see in our political system today. And I want to start first with St. Paul and the social science of love. In 1969, Richard Nixon was presented with a big problem, a big policy problem. Against all odds and against all predictions, the United States was losing the war in Vietnam. It didn't make sense. The United States had better technology, better firepower, better training. It had never happened before that this superior military force would be falling behind. So President Nixon impaneled a group of experts to go to Vietnam and find an answer. Why? What was going wrong? Simply, what could we do differently? Well, they studied and they wrote up a report and they came back and they presented it to the President of the United States. Said, Mr. President, there is an answer. And here's what it was. 20% of active duty American military forces in Vietnam were addicted to heroin. It was unthinkable. And it makes sense. If 1 in 5 of your troops is addicted to literally the most addictive substance in the world, how do you expect to win a war? So the people in charge got to work. The smartest people surrounding the president and think tanks and experts and social scientists like me started putting together solutions. And not just in Vietnam, but rather for when the troops in Vietnam came back from Vietnam. Because think about it. If you have thousands and thousands of men coming back from the war, entering communities addicted to heroin, you know you have a big problem on your hands. Big public health crisis, a big policing crisis, a big crisis for communities and families. So they put together, as they always do, a multi-point plan and then braced themselves as the men came home. And they did by the thousands, and nothing happened. Almost nothing, that is. 90% of the heroin-addicted troops who came home from Vietnam spontaneously stopped using heroin on their first day home, 90%. And only 5% became re-addicted in the next year. Nobody has ever heard of this before. Nobody's ever seen anything like this in the annals of drug addiction. The question was, why did that happen? How is it possible? Have you ever asked somebody addicted to drugs how it feels? It seems like a prurient, personal question, inappropriate perhaps. I have. I've asked heroin addicts what heroin feels like. And you know what they say sometimes? They say it feels like pure love. And there's a reason for that. It turns out that it actually stimulates the circuits in the brain that are associated with love. It is a substitute for love. And a lot of people who are very lonely, very separated from loved ones, are more likely to become addicted to drugs for this reason. Now, I bring this up because it was only a couple of decades later, after this experience in Vietnam, that neuroscientists came to a realization about what had happened. Why did so many of the men coming home from Vietnam spontaneously stop using? And the answer is because they got the real love that they were seeking when they came home. They were reunited with their wives and their children and their parents and their friends, and they didn't need the heroin anymore. See, what was happening was that their brains were excreting a neuropeptide, a neurotransmitter that functions as a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is produced by the human brain in reaction to eye contact and touch with the people that you love. It's a miracle. It's a gift from our Lord to connect us to each other, I believe. And it is one of the most pleasurable, satisfying things in life. If you don't have it, you'll be miserable and you will look for a substitute. So, what can we say about this? We can say that we need connection. We need love. And if we don't have it, everything's going to go wrong. We'll be at each other's throats. We will hurt ourselves. Nothing will go right. So we learned this in history in 1969. We learned this from science. It's interesting that I think back to my great mentor, intellectually. My academic teacher, James Q. Wilson, perhaps the greatest social scientist of the past 100 years. He sat in on my doctoral dissertation defense, which went very poorly. Later, he wrote the foreword to my first book. He sat on the board of directors of the American Enterprise Institute, where I was president for 11 years. And he was so close to me all through that time. And one time I remember he said to me, because we were both very interested in the middle of public policy. That's what we did for a living. And he said to me, don't forget that public policy, it only affects people's lives at the 5% margin. And I said, well, Jim, you could have told me that before I got my PhD in this, right? But then I asked the obvious question. I said, well, what's the other 95% that affects people in their lives? And he said, mostly love. It's funny, isn't it? We all know this. And I've given you the historical precedent for it and the neurobiological precedent for it and that from my intellectual mentor. But Christians have always known this, that love is the life in life, that St. Paul was correct, and it is in point of fact the secret of evangelization. Let me read for you the words of Tertullian, the Carthaginian Christian, who in the year 200 was explaining how the put upon Christians, those who were being persecuted and put to death, how at the same time, notwithstanding their victimization, that they were wholesale converting the pagans. How did they do it? Here's what he wrote. Look, the pagans say, how they love one another, for they themselves hate one another, and how they're ready to die for each other, for they, the pagans, are readier to kill one another. The example of love that magnetizes people, that draws us to ourselves in a winsome way. St. Augustine put it simply. You want to know your strategy for life? Here's what he said. Love and do what you will. St. John the Apostle was simpler. God is love. So here's your first lesson. Love is your apostolate. Focus on it more, talk about it more, demonstrate it more. How? We need specifics. Well, that comes in chapters 2 and 3.
Greetings to everybody from sunny Santa Barbara, California. Listen, I'm just delighted to have the opportunity to send a word of congratulations to my good friend, Dr. Arthur Brooks, on the reception of the John Paul II Award. I can't think of anyone who is more deserving of this award than you, Arthur. You know, years ago, I heard this distinction between two basic types of people. There are people that suck life out of a room, and there are people that breathe life into a room. And you, I think, are a prime example of that latter category. Whenever I'm with you, I just feel more alive. I feel more intelligent, more curious, more interested, more eager to follow the promptings of the Lord. And that's a tremendous gift. You give it to me personally, but you give it to the whole church and to the wider society. I've always admired deeply the ways, always winsome, always intelligent, never in a threatening way, that you bring the faith into some of the highest sectors of our culture and our society. So congratulations, Arthur, to you on this award. Also, thanks to the CIC in Washington, a place I've always loved to visit, believe very much in your mission. So all the best to you, Arthur, and blessings to the Catholic Information Center.
Good evening. I want to congratulate my dear friend Arthur Brooks on being the recipient of this year's John Paul II New Evangelization Award. We all know an evangelist is someone who spreads the gospel, who spreads the good news. And since the very first time I met Arthur, that's exactly what he spends his time doing, spreading the good news. Like St. Paul, Arthur will travel anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, to see anyone, as long as he can spread the good news and evangelize. Arthur, thanks for doing that for all of us. And thank you to the Catholic Information Center. The service you do in the midst of the most powerful city in the world, serving as a beacon and a safe harbor for truth and contemplation and holiness and peace. Thank you.
Not long ago, I was talking to a doctor who works for Cigna, the big health insurance company, the health provider. And he told me that he was part of a team dedicated to one topic: loneliness. A health insurance provider that has a team of dozens of people working on the subject of loneliness. I said, what's that all about? And he said, it's an epidemic. And it's worse than obesity. It's worse than smoking in certain populations. It's creating problems of suicide and drug addiction and alcoholism. He said, this is a big problem in America, and it's hurting our bottom line. I said, yeah, I bet it is hurting your bottom line, but that's obviously not what most of us care about these days. If there's truly a loneliness epidemic on our hands, that's a big problem for our lives. But more than that, here's one of the things that we know as evangelical Catholics. The whole world goes around talking about crises and tragedies and problems. Those are actually opportunities. That's the entrepreneurial mindset. And the evangelical Catholic mindset is the entrepreneurial mindset. So as soon as I heard that we have a loneliness epidemic and it's a problem that we don't know how to get our minds around, I said, aha, that's an opportunity for those of us that are working to improve our apostolate, to have a more expansive mission. And that's what I want to talk about in this chapter. I have a colleague in my business, which is social science, behavior, love, happiness. Her name is Jean Twenge. She is a social psychologist who teaches at San Diego State University. We don't work together in the same institution, but I admire her work tremendously because she does work on this problem of loneliness. And she tries to understand why it is that people are apparently so isolated. And when you look at the data, it's unambiguous. You see loneliness levels rising. More and more people say that nobody knows me. And it's most acute among young people. It's most acute among teenagers, late teenagers, and people in their 20s, millennials, and the so-called Gen Z, which Jean Twenge calls iGen because of the internet and how it affects their lives. She believes that one of the key parts of loneliness that feeds the loneliness and is a symptom of the loneliness among young people is a precipitous decline in romantic activity. Now, this is a big surprise for people my age. This is a big surprise because you always think that, when you're in your 20s, what else is there, right? When I was in my 20s, I really thought about two things. I thought about music and love, romantic love, and not in that order. But she shows comprehensively with her data and her research that there's a huge decline in romantic activity compared to past generations, that there has been a 30 percentage point likelihood of dating among 18-year-olds. When I was graduating from high school, the chances were about 85% that I or somebody my age would go on at least one date. Now it's in the mid-50s, the likelihood of going on a date. One's late teens. There's a 50% less likelihood of marriage for people in their 20s. And you're probably saying, yeah, but that's because there's so much cohabitation. That's down too. It turns out that people are just not in love in the way that they were. Some social scientists believe that we have as much as a third lower likelihood of being in love among people in their 20s compared to past generations. For example, people my age when we were in our 20s. So I have to ask, what lies behind that? Why is it that, I get it. People are not in love with each other and they're lonely as a result of it. That's degrading their quality of life. What lies behind this lack of romantic love? Well, for the answer to that, I went to somebody that I've worked with closely and somebody I hold in tremendously high intellectual esteem. His name is Jonathan Haidt. He's a social psychologist who teaches at New York University. John Haidt is a visionary scholar. He's always looking at the most important subjects. I find he's always right. So I said, John, I've been looking at this loneliness problem and the fact that people aren't falling in love. And why is that? And he says, oh, it's clear. He said, because we have too much of the opposite of love. I said, well, what's the opposite of love? And he said, fear. I said, no, the opposite of love is hate. He said, no. Hatred is downstream from fear. Fear is the opposite of love. And then I thought about it. Of course, St. John the Apostle, perfect love drives out fear. We know as Christians that fear is the opposite of love. And so therefore, if you don't see enough love, look for fear. I'm a Catholic. I should have known, but I got it from a psychologist instead. God speaks through social scientists sometimes. Amazing. I know it's hard to imagine. So then he talked about why. Because I said, why would young people have so much fear, more fear than past generations? Who's to blame for that? And he said, you are. I said, me? What did I do? I said, well, let me ask you a question. He said, how old were you the first time that you went out on your own to do an errand or to, walk to school by yourself? How old were you? I said, I don't know, 5. And then he said, you have kids, you have teenagers. I said, how old's your daughter? At the time, my daughter was 16. He said, how old was she the first time that you let her go out by herself to run an errand? I said, I don't know, 14. He said, that's the problem. You have to expose yourself to pathogens. You have to be fully alive. When your parents don't let you go out, you're not going to actually learn to grow up. You're going to be more fearful than you should be. He says, that's the problem. Is that we're stunting the emotional growth of young people today. And what happens? We adjudicate their play dates. We make sure that they're not fighting with each other. We helicopter parent and call their teachers. We drop in on them constantly in college. The colleges respond by creating a safe space so that people are not exposed to ideas with which they disagree such that they feel safer. And then they get out of college, and what do we expect? They're also living in an internet generation where on social media, bullying and rejection and repudiation are around them and they're scary. Well, no wonder they're more fearful. They're living under circumstances that are scarier and different, and they've not been exposed to the pathogens of rejection and fear by the time they're adults. What do you want them to do? Then to go out and fall in love and maybe have their hearts broken when they have no experience in that? It started to make sense. There is a lot of fear. So how do we deal with that? Now remember, evangelical Catholicism is an act of entrepreneurship. If we want to understand love, we need to understand it like entrepreneurs. Now, what do I mean by that? When I talk to entrepreneurs, which I have the privilege of doing a lot, the one thing that's characteristic of entrepreneurial activity is having a lot of capital that you put at risk in search of explosive rewards. Forget how you denominate all that. Forget how you denominate the capital, whether it's money or something else, and forget how you denominate the rewards. That's why I make the assertion that love is a fundamentally entrepreneurial thing, because you're putting something at risk, your heart, in search of explosive returns in love. And when we have too much fear, we won't be entrepreneurial enough. Here's my value proposition. We need to help young people. We need to encourage people to take a risk with their hearts and to be entrepreneurs in love. This is a big realization for me last year. And I started talking about it with groups of young people. I was giving a talk on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. for a group of people in their 20s, a big group of people in their 20s. And I said, people your age, you talk about entrepreneurship and you really think you're entrepreneurial, and that's great. But you want to be a real entrepreneur? You got to be an entrepreneur with your heart. You got to take a risk. You got to fall in love if you're a real entrepreneur. You got to declare your love. And if it's not scary, it's not entrepreneurial. I thought it was pretty clever. And a couple of weeks after I gave that speech, a guy approaches me, a young guy in his 20s. He approaches me on an airplane. He says, "You Dr. Brooks?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I saw you give that speech. Were you talking about the enterprise of love and my startup life and giving my heart away, and I can't get it out of my head. I said, yeah. He says, I'm on my way right now to declare my love for a woman that I've been in love with for 2 years and I've never told her. And I said, it was only a speech, man. I mean, I don't want to ruin your life. But I gave him my email address, said, tell me how it turns out. And then he went back to his seat and I said my rosary for him. And then I didn't hear from him. A couple of months pass. I saw him at a Christmas party and his face was imprinted on my brain for the obvious reason. So I went up to him and said, remember me? And he said, oh yeah. I said, how did it turn out with that woman you're in love with? And he said, she shot me down. She didn't just shoot me down. She told me she was in love with somebody else. It was really, really painful. And I was contrite at that moment. I was sorry. And I apologized to him. And he said, no, I've been meaning to call you. I said, I bet. He says, no. I've been meaning to call you to thank you. I said, thank me for what? He said, I was more afraid of that than anything in my life. I thought that getting rejected by her would be the worst thing that would ever happen. And it did happen, and I didn't die. Thank you for helping me to get over that fear. It's amazing, isn't it? Romantic love is an act of personal entrepreneurship that can change everything. Let me read you the greatest expert on this. William Shakespeare in 1609 wrote his 29th sonnet. Many of you know this, but it basically just sums up all the social science. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I alone beweep my outcast state and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, happily I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Maybe it doesn't sound biblical to you. That's wrong. Here's the Song of Songs, 5:9. I adjure you, daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my lover, what shall you tell him? That I am faint with love. Here's the lesson. You want to spread God's love? You need to promote romantic love.
Hey Arthur, Paul Ryan here. I just want to give you a hearty congratulations for being the recipient of the JP2 Award for New Evangelization. I cannot think of a better recipient for this. Sorry we have to do this gala online like this, but I just want to tell you how impressed I have been with all of your years of work. I could not think of a better person for this award because you really do proselytize the gospel in a way that's absorbable for people. From your classes at Harvard, which I got the chance to participate in this last year, to all your years at AEI, to your books, you have a way of just having this infectious enthusiasm way of spreading the gospel, treating others like you want to be treated, value and dignity of every human life. You have had a way of pushing and proselytizing Christ's principles, biblical values, in a way that people, young and old, really gravitate toward. So I cannot think of a better person for this. I'm so glad you've received this award. Congratulations and God bless.
Hey, Arthur. All of us at AI want to congratulate you on receiving the Catholic Information Center's John Paul II Award. While we often talk about your success in advocating for policies that improve and strengthen our country, I'm so glad to see you recognized for the spiritual underpinnings of your work. In everything you do, you recognize human dignity and promote human flourishing, highlighting the sense of responsibility for the welfare of others that stands at the core of our faith. All of us at AEI congratulate you on this well-deserved award.
People talk constantly about how bad politics has gotten in the United States and in fact in countries all around the world, how we're polarized, how we're at each other's throats, how we seem to hate each other. Most people don't like that. The big overwhelming majority of Americans hate how divided we become, but we don't know what to do. The Catholic Information Center located in Washington, D.C. is at the epicenter of these particular problems. And I remember when it first occurred to me what a crisis this really was in the United States. I mean, I've seen it for a long time, but I remember in early 2014, I read an article. You know, I'm a social scientist, so I'm reading this technical literature all the time. And I was reading an article by 3 social psychologists in February of 2014 about a phenomenon called motive attribution asymmetry. Sounds complicated. It's actually a fairly simple concept. That's what we academics do. We take a fairly simple concept, we take fancy words, and then we get tenure. Motive attribution asymmetry. What is it? This was an article that was written by these psychologists about the idea that when you have implacable hostile conflict between two groups, generally speaking, it follows a pattern in which both sides believe that they're motivated by love, but the other side's motivated by hatred. Now, that's a mistake. That's a cognitive error. Why? Because you can't have a conflict in which both sides are simultaneously motivated by love and hatred. Same time. Can't happen. One side is mistaken, or usually both sides are. But this is what characterizes most implacable human conflict. And you see it in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, in the wake of the Rwandan genocide in the Balkans, and conflicts all over the world. You even see it in couples that are quarreling and getting divorced. One of the things that all of the literature suggests is that both sides say, I love, but the other person hates, and that's the reason we can't get along. Motive attribution asymmetry explains a lot. So I was very interested in this article because it, talks about a phenomenon I've seen a lot. But here's what really got my attention. The authors in that article pointed out that for the first time since they've been keeping records on motive attribution asymmetry, they see the same level between Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and liberals politically in the United States, as they see between Palestinians and Israelis. This is in February of 2014. Now, this came down like a hammer blow because that was a problem then, and it looked like it was going to become a much bigger problem, and in point of fact, it did. This was really on my heart that spring. I was thinking about what can I do to try to make this better? Trying to get my mind around this problem. And I remember a couple of months later, I was doing what I always do. I mean, I travel around and I give speeches and I talk to people. And I love my life. I love my job because I love sharing ideas with people. I'll talk to all audiences, conservative, liberal, political, non-political, business people, kids. I don't care. I just want to share ideas with people. And it was a couple of months after I read that article when I was giving a speech in New Hampshire. It was actually a sort of semi-political rally for conservative activists, politically conservative activists. Well, I got there a little bit early. There were 600 activists in the audience, and I saw the program, and I realized I was the only speaker on the program who was not running for president. 15 presidential candidates or presumptive presidential candidates and me. So I thought, well, this is a mistake. But then again, remember, I'm an evangelical Catholic, which is to say there are no mistakes, there are no problems, there's only opportunities. What's the opportunity? Said a Hail Mary, prayed about it, and I realized, what can I do that these presidential candidates can't do with this audience? And the answer is, I can say anything I want because I don't need any votes. So I listened to a couple of the speakers before me, and they were doing what politicians always do. They were throwing raw stakes into the audience and saying basically, you're right. And the other side, they're stupid and evil, effectively. And then I got up and I gave my speech. And in the middle of it, I said, my friends, you've been hearing from all the speakers that you're right and the other side's wrong and bad. And I want you to think for a minute about something, which is that It's actually not true that the people who aren't here, who would be uncomfortable with this message, who disagree, that they're stupid and evil. They're just Americans who disagree with you on public policy. And if you want to persuade them, which should be your goal is persuasion, you can't do it by insulting them. Nobody in history has ever been insulted into agreement. There's only one way that you can persuade people, and that's with love. It was not an applause line, but there was applause because the lady says, God bless her, she wasn't trying to repudiate me or insult me or hurt my feelings. She said, I think they're stupid and evil. That's what got the applause. And now, at that moment, what did I think? First thing I thought was that article I had read 2 months before, because that was motive attribution asymmetry in action. But then my second thought was Seattle. Why? It's my hometown. It's the most politically progressive place in the United States. My mother was an artist and my father was a college professor in Seattle. What do you think their politics were? I'm kind of an outlier in my family. I may have disagreed with members of my family politically, but let me tell you something about my family. They were not stupid and they were not evil. They were great parents, a wonderful family. They brought me up in the faith. They brought me up to value education and the things that have actually brought so much richness to my life. I'm so grateful to them. Both my parents died young, but I think about them. I pray for them every day. So why did I think of that? Because when that lady said that in New Hampshire as a joke, displaying this mode of attribution asymmetry, she was insulting my mom. And I took it personally. That's what's going on in this country. Ask yourselves this. We all have political views. We all have strong political views. I get it. That's good. It's important to know what you think, know what you stand for. But ask yourself this. How many of you watching my words right now, how many of you love somebody with whom you disagree politically? How much do you want somebody on so-called your side insulting that person? There's something going wrong, and there's something that we've got to be able to do, not to solve the problem that certain people think wrong, but that we can't actually disagree in any productive way. We need to be able to use love to stop that. So let's start by diagnosing the problem. Some people say we're too angry. And it's true, you hear a lot of anger in American politics today, but that's not the problem. Anger is a hot emotion. It's produced by the limbic system of the brain. It is a primary emotion, and it basically says, I disagree with something. I want you to change. I want you to think differently. It actually says, I care. Anger, and by the way, in the research, it's very clear that anger and divorce are uncorrelated, which is, great. I've been married for almost 30 years to a Spaniard. And the secret to my decades of happy marriage is the lack of correlation between anger and divorce. The problem in divorce, and that tears people apart in general, is not anger. It's where you take that primary emotion of anger and you take another primary negative emotion, disgust, and you mix them together. Now, disgust is reserved for pathogens. It's also primary. It bypasses the medial prefrontal cortex of the brain. It goes directly to the lizard brain. But when you mix the pathogen experience or reaction with disgust, with anger, it turns it ice cold, and you get a complex emotion called contempt. Contempt, according to the great 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, is the conviction of the utter worthlessness of another person. Contempt is the love killer. Contempt earns you permanent enemies. You can get angry with people and it'll be fine. You show contempt, you show disgust for another person, it won't be fine. Think about it. When somebody has shown disgust and contempt for you, how it made you feel. I have a friend named John Gottman, the world's leading expert in marital reconciliation. He's brought thousands of couples back together again. He has a marriage laboratory in Seattle. And he's a hero. I mean, anybody who brings couples together so they don't get divorced is a hero. We all know that the basis of any good society is stable families. Stable families, what do they require? Mom and dad in love. This guy tries to make mom and dad be in love more. That's why he's a hero. And John Gottman, he says that he can, in just a few minutes, predict with 95% plus accuracy whether a couple will be divorced within 3 years. You want to know what he's looking for? Eye rolling, sarcasm, derision, dismissal, contempt. He's looking for the signs of people saying to each other in not so many words, what you just said is worthless, and you're worthless. That's what will drive people permanently apart. Now, why do we do it? I mean, why would married couples do it? Why would people do that to each other? And the answer is simple. It's a habit. We have a lot of bad habits in our lives. We govern habits in a part of our brain called the nucleus accumbens, which is a very ancient part of the brain. And it's efficient because you need habits. You don't need to spend bandwidth on old experiences. You want to have new experiences and let the old experiences govern themselves. The nucleus accumbens lets you do that. You go to a certain place to find food every day, for example. Unfortunately, they also govern bad habits, like the way that we talk to each other. So what do we need to do? We need to break the bad habit of contempt if we want to solve the political polarization problem in our country. How do we do that? Well, how do you break any habit? And the answer is you have to reprogram your nucleus accumbens, this little part of your brain. And you don't do it with willpower. I mean, maybe some of you have been addicted to cigarettes. You've been smokers. I used to be a smoker. I was a musician for many years, making my living. And in those years, I did a lot of musicians do during their break. They smoke cigarettes. And I knew I shouldn't do it. It made my mother sad, and it was expensive, and it was going to hurt my health, and there was no good was going to come from it. I had to quit. So I tried to use my willpower. I won't smoke. I always smoked. That's because the willpower is not the way that you break a habit. The way that you break a habit is by reprogramming the nucleus accumbens. How? When you feel the stimulus to do something with which you have a bad habit, you stop. And you put space between stimulus and response. And then you choose to substitute another behavior for the bad behavior. So every time you want to smoke, have a drink. That's bad advice. You get my point. Substitution is the secret. So if you have a contempt habit, if we have a contempt habit, and when I say we, I mean me too. I've seen my clips on YouTube, I saw myself debating somebody on a news network about, something in economics. And the person I was debating made what I considered an ill-considered point. And I rolled my eyes. Oh, I guarantee you that my interlocutor didn't go home and say, I was debating Arthur Brooks and he was making some very valid points. I guarantee you that she said, that guy's a jerk. Why? Because I treated her with contempt inadvertently, but that's scant comfort. What do I need to do? What do you need to do? What do we need to do with our contempt habit if we want to turn things around? We need to substitute something, to put it in the space between stimulus and response. When you feel contempt, what should you do? Ask a lot of people and they'll say, behave with civility and tolerance. That's garbage. Civility is garbage. If I told you that my wife Esther and I are civil to each other, you'd say we need counseling. If I told you that my employees are tolerant of me, you'd say I have an HR problem. No. It's not good enough. It's not high enough standard for us as civilized people, and it's especially not high enough standard for us as Catholics. Civility and tolerance. No, we need love. It's the only thing that we need. We need to love each other. Is that possible? The most subversive single teaching in the last 2,000 years. You know what it is? Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 5, verse 44. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. That's it, isn't it? It's not good enough to tolerate your enemies. Jesus didn't say be civil to your enemies. He said love your enemies. Now you might be asking yourself, what if I don't feel it? Furthermore, what about the people who actually deserve contempt? Maybe there are people who deserve contempt. Look, you decide. What about them? For this, I want to take you to one of the great teachers of our era, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In a sermon he gave on that verse, Matthew 5:44, on November 17, 1957, at the Dexter Street Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. Love has within it a redemptive power, and there is a power that eventually transforms individuals. That's why Jesus says, love your enemies. Because if you hate your enemies, you have no way to redeem and to transform your enemies. But if you love your enemies, you will discover that at the very root of love is the power of redemption. You can lift people up. You can persuade. And that is your goal. That is your obligation. That is your privilege. Remember, not tragedy, not problems, opportunities. Love is your entrepreneurial vehicle to persuade and to create value. Lesson number 3 is simply this. Love is the test of our apostolate. Seek out contempt. Look for the problem. Run toward it like a missionary. And I say that under advisement because you know what? I've had a lot of missionaries on both sides of my family. I'm a convert from evangelical Protestantism, and I know a lot about missionaries, let me tell you. And you know words that no humans have ever uttered before? Oh, look, good, there's missionaries on the porch. Ever. It's like, hide. But they're so full of joy. Why? Because they're looking for the instance in which people need the truth and don't have it, and they get to provide it. That's you and me in the culture of contempt. Run toward it like a missionary with your love. Doesn't matter if you don't feel it. St. Thomas Aquinas said that to love is to will the good of the other. He didn't say anything about feeling. To will the good of the other. You will be a force that fights against contempt and does it in such a way that other people want to fight against it as well. Here's my last word. St. Jose Maria Escribá, the founder of Opus Dei, he talked about the apostolate of love in 1967 at the University of Navarre in Spain. This was just a speech, but what a poet. Here are his words. When a Christian carries out with love the most insignificant everyday action, that action overflows with the transcendence of God. Heaven and earth seem to merge on the horizon. But where they really meet is in your hearts. It's a difficult time for our nation and world. We lack a lot of love. But don't forget that that's why we're here. That's our opportunity. God put us here as missionaries to our brothers and sisters, for being part of that movement, for being part of the movement that is the Catholic Information Center, for being apostolic, evangelical, Catholic witnesses. God bless you, and thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much, Arthur, and congratulations again. And thank you to Speaker Paul Ryan, Bishop Barron, Frank Hanna, and Robert Dorr for taking the time to send in those words of congratulations to Arthur and encourage our work here at the CIC. We are blessed to have your support. We have one final surprise for you this evening, a musical performance by Marie Miller, a talented singer who has had her music featured on pop radio, toured the country with American Idol winners, and even performed for Pope Francis in Philadelphia. But before that, I want to take just a minute to thank all of you again for joining us this evening. In spite of all that we have seen in 2020, I am hopeful for the future. The CIC will survive this pandemic, God willing. We have been able to provide the Mass through thick and thin this year. But to continue to do so, we will need the assistance of generous people like you. Our annual gala is our largest fundraiser of the year, and your support tonight is crucial for us to maintain our presence near the White House during these turbulent times. On that note, I want to thank all of you who have already contributed to our first ever virtual gala. For those of you who have not yet made a contribution, I encourage you to do so. And a special thanks again to all our generous sponsors who helped make this night possible. My friends, the Catholic faith is alive on K Street. Through your prayers and your contributions, you can be a part of our mission to bring Christ to the heart of the capital. May God bless you, your families, and our country. Without further ado, to close our evening together, here, performing a song from her new album Little Dreams, please enjoy Marie Miller.
Hey everyone, this is Marie Miller, and I am just so excited and blessed to be able to be part of this incredible gala. Thank you so much to the CIC for having me. This song is very special to me, and it's called Brave New Step. Paralyzing fear keeps me standing on ground I know is no longer safe, and I can feel the shake in this foundation telling me that I just can't stay. I can't stay here. I don't have the answers I wish that I had. At the end of these questions is one brave new step, and I don't have tomorrow, just one more deep breath. At the end of my sorrow is one brave new step. Painted every scene of my future, memorized the shadows and the lines, and now I'm here erasing all these endings, 'cause life decides to draw out of the lines. I can't stay here. I don't have the answers I wish that I had. At the end of my questions is one brave new step, and I don't have tomorrow, just one more deep breath. At the end of my sorrow is one brave new step. I clung to the ashes, didn't want to forget, but I'm ready to let go, take one brave new step. Oh, 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 oh.